Across the endless void of realities, there are universes so far removed from each other that even the most advanced minds dare not imagine a bridge between them. Yet, for one man, or perhaps one force of scientific chaos, barriers mean very little. His name is Rick Sanchez, a scientist, a nihilist, and an interdimensional hurricane wearing a lab coat. In his universe, he's a god among mortals, a drunk genius capable of creating pocket realities and unraveling time with a shrug. But in the grim darkness of the far future, where there is only war, even Rick would find himself tested in ways he could never have predicted. It began, as most of Rick's misadventures do, with a mistake disguised as brilliance. Late one night, in his garage lab, littered with beer cans and quantum schematics, Rick was trying to prove a theory about existential density. The idea that the more hopeless a universe is, the more real it becomes. Morty stood behind him, wide-eyed and trembling, holding what looked like a cosmic car battery that hummed with unstable power. Rick, are you sure this is a good idea?" Morty stammered. Rick belched and waved him off. "Morty, good ideas are for people who still care about consequences. We're going to take a peek at the densest universe in the multiverse, the one so heavy with despair that physics itself can't escape it." The portal gun fired with a sound like tearing metal and whispering screams. Instead of the usual swirling green vortex, the portal that opened was black and gold, pulsing like a wound in space. The air in the garage thickened, and a faint chanting echoed from the other side. That's not normal portal stuff, Rick," Morty yelled, clutching the battery tighter. Rick adjusted his goggles, peering into the abyss. "Congratulations, Morty. We just found the Warhammer 40,000 universe." For the briefest second, Rick hesitated. He had seen countless realities, ones where gods were simulations, where love was a chemical illusion. But the energy radiating from this tier was something else. It wasn't science. It wasn't magic. It was faith made manifest, weaponized belief. Naturally, that only made him more curious. "Grab your helmet, Morty. We're going sightseeing." The transition was instant and brutal. On the other side of the portal, they emerged in the middle of a desolate wasteland, a battlefield strewn with rusting tanks, shattered bones, and half-buried banners bearing the double-headed eagle of the Imperium of man. The sky was red and swollen with ash. Rick squinted through the haze. Smells like fascism and napalm." Must be Tuesday before Morty could reply. A squad of Imperial guardsmen crested the ridge, laser guns raised. Their armor was dented, faces smeared with dirt and fear. One of them shouted, "Identify yourselves!" "In the name of the Emperor." Rick sighed, producing what looked like a remote control, crossed with a grenade. "Listen, spacemen, I'm not here to join your holy book club." The guardsman fired, bright red bolts slicing the air. Rick clicked the device once, and the shots froze mid-air, energy particles suspended like fireflies. Morty screamed, ducking behind a rock. Rick rolled his eyes. "Relax, Morty. I just paused local space-time." Bunch of zealots with flashlights. Rick examined one of the suspended bolts, then turned to Morty with a grin. "You see, this is what I was talking about. They're using plasma technology wrapped in religious symbolism. They pray to their machines, Morty. Do you realize how inefficient that is? It's like running your iPhone on blind faith." He unpaused the scene. The bolts resumed their path, missing the duo entirely as Rick casually redirected them with a wrist flick. The guardsmen fell to their knees, whispering prayers to the Emperor. Morty's voice trembled. "Rick, they think you're some kind of god," Rick chuckled darkly. Well, Morty, they're half right. In orbit above, aboard a colossal Imperial battleship, sensors flared. The anomaly had not gone unnoticed. Tech priests of the Adeptus Mechanicus chanted binary litanies as they detected an energy signature unlike anything catalogued in the Mechanicum's sacred archives. Unholy readings detected, one droned through vox distortion, potential xeno-sorcery or warp disturbance. The Inquisitor on deck narrowed his eyes. Send coordinates to the nearest regiment. If this is heresy, we shall burn it from the Emperor's sight. Meanwhile, Rick was busy scavenging from a destroyed Chimera transport. He dismantled its plasma coil, grafted on components from his portal gun, and muttered to himself, "See, Morty, these people built an empire on fear and dogma, but they've accidentally created one of the most impressive energy infrastructures I've ever seen. Warp drives, psychic networks, faster-than-light communication. It's all powered by their collective insanity. Honestly, I'm impressed." Morty looked around at the endless corpses and smoke. Impressed? Rick, this place is awful. Everyone's either dead or praying or killing something. Rick smirked, tightening a bolt. Yeah, Morty, it's called commitment. Maybe if your generation worshipped science as hard as these people worship pain, we'd have hover cities by now. The sound of engines thundered in the distance, massive tanks rolling forward, banners snapping in the toxic wind. Rick glanced up. Ah, finally. Someone important from the horizon, a space marine emerged, towering, armored in blue and gold, carrying a bolter that looked more like a handheld missile launcher. His armor bore the sigil of the Ultramarines. The soldier's voice boomed like thunder through a vox grill. "Identify yourself, intruder. By order of the Emperor of Mankind, you stand upon sacred soil." Rick raised an eyebrow. "Oh, great. Another authoritarian with delusions of grandeur." Morty whispered, "Rick, that guy's huge. Don't make him mad." Rick grinned. "Morty, the day I start fearing blue tin cans is the day I join the Church of Scientology." The Marine's patience was short. "You are not sanctioned by the Mechanicum. Your presence reeks of the warp. Surrender your technology for purification." Rick snapped his fingers, opening a mini portal behind the Marine. The warrior turned just in time to see his own bolter vanish into it, only to reappear aimed at his helmet. A single shot echoed. The Marine collapsed, armor sparking, his gene-forged body twitching. Rick dusted his hands. "Science, 1. Super soldier cult, 0. Morty stared in horror. "Rick, you just killed a space marine." Rick shrugged. He was basically a glorified monk with a missile launcher. Besides, look at this. He pried open the Marine's armor, studying the gene seed implants and neural links. "Morty, these people literally mass-produce demigods. The Emperor's running a eugenics program on a cosmic scale. This is what happens when your species trades curiosity for obedience." As Rick spoke, the air began to hum. A faint golden light shimmered through the clouds. Morty pointed up, shaking. Rick, what's that?" Rick frowned. "That, Morty, is either a warp storm or a god complex getting stage time." Above them, psychic energy swirled, ribbons of light forming a colossal visage of the Emperor's golden face. The very ground quaked with divine fury. "Blasphemer," the voice thundered across the plains. "You tread where only faith sustains life. Leave this realm or be unmade." Rick sighed, pulling a flask from his coat. "Oh, great." The space pope himself, Morty dropped to his knees, covering his ears. "Rick, we gotta go. He's gonna kill us." Rick took a swig and smirked. "Nah, Morty. I didn't come here to run from gods. I came to see if I can outthink one. And somewhere deep within the warp, something ancient stirred, something that recognized Rick's presence not as divine, but as competition. The Emperor's psychic projection shimmered across the battlefield, radiating golden fire and holy wrath. To the mortals of this galaxy, it was the face of salvation, judgment, and eternal authority. To Rick Sanchez, it was just another cosmic ego trip wrapped in light particles. He squinted at the apparition, unimpressed. You know, for a supposedly omniscient corpse, you sure love dramatic entrances, Rick muttered, adjusting a dial on his wrist-mounted portal stabilizer. The air around him buzzed with psionic energy, the sheer force of the Emperor's will pressing against reality. You defy the Imperium of man, the spectral voice boomed, shaking the earth. You bring corruption and heresy into my domain. Rick snorted. Relax, glowstick. I'm not here to corrupt your little fascist playground. I'm here to study it. The Emperor's gaze intensified, beams of psychic energy lancing toward Rick like divine spears. Rick lifted a small metallic sphere, pressed a button, and instantly the attack dispersed, absorbed into a swirling, anti-psychic field that bent light itself. Sorry, Your Holiness, Rick said, smiling. This little baby runs on negentropy. It eats psychic attacks for breakfast and farts out quantum coherence. Try harder, Morty, crouched behind a broken banner, shouted over the storm. Rick, that's the Emperor of mankind. He's like the most powerful being in this universe. You can't just insult him. Rick raised an eyebrow. Morty, power without curiosity is just cosmic bureaucracy. And this guy, he's the CEO of stagnation. The Emperor's voice rolled through their minds. Your arrogance mirrors that of the dark gods. You mock what you cannot comprehend. Rick's smirk faltered for just a moment. Oh, I comprehend it fine, he replied. You built an empire on fear, kept it running on faith, and called it civilization. Congratulations, you've industrialized despair. For a heartbeat, even the howling winds fell silent. Then, as if acknowledging Rick's defiance, the golden apparition began to fade, its light receding into the warp. But the voice lingered. Your science is a blade that cuts both ways, Wanderer. This galaxy has no place for your kind. Rick stared at the fading light. Yeah, he said quietly, I get that a lot. The storm eased. Ash and dust settled once more across the dead plain. Morty stood up shakily, glancing around. So, what now, Rick? We just made the space god angry. Isn't that like bad? Rick shrugged. Morty, I've pissed off gods, bureaucrats, and entire dimensions. It's a hobby. Now grab that Marine's helmet. I'm gonna need it for calibration. Back aboard the Imperial battleship, Heresy's End, chaos reigned. The sensors had gone blind for several minutes, their sacred machine spirits overwhelmed by the energy signatures below. Tech priests chanted in binary panic, and the Inquisitor stared at the readings in disbelief. He spoke with the Emperor, one of the adepts whispered. The psychic resonance is unmistakable. The Inquisitor's jaw tightened. No mortal speaks with the Emperor and lives unpurged. Prepare an exterminatus protocol. The planet is lost. Meanwhile, Rick and Morty had taken shelter inside the wreckage of a crashed Aquila lander. Rick was busy tinkering, spreading the Space Marine's armor components across a makeshift workbench. He muttered to himself as his tools hummed. You know, Morty, their technology is incredible, but it's like a car built by a cult. Every time they need to change the oil, they perform a 40-minute prayer ritual. Morty shivered. Rick, maybe we should leave before they nuke the whole planet. Rick didn't look up. Relax. They won't bomb it while they're still trying to figure out what I am. Besides, I'm not leaving until I've cracked their warp drive tech. You realize this universe runs on weaponized emotion? That's like finding out anxiety can power a starship. He lifted a fragment of the Marine's chest plate, attaching it to a crystalline circuit. The material shimmered, briefly revealing threads of energy twisting through dimensions. This stuff, Rick murmured, isn't metal. It's half metaphysical. Every atom's been prayed into existence. Morty blinked. Wait, you mean their machines work because they believe they work? Rick pointed a finger like a teacher correcting a slow student. Exactly, Morty. The Mechanicus doesn't understand the tech. They worship it. And somehow, that belief stabilizes the physics around it. It's insane. It's genius. It's basically religion as quantum code. Before Morty could respond, a low rumble shook the lander. Outside, engines roared. Rick peeked through a crack and saw a column of armored vehicles approaching, Imperial Guard tanks flanked by robed tech priests chanting through Vox amplifiers. Looks like the cult brought backup, Rick muttered. All right, Morty. Time to improvise. He reached into his coat and produced what looked like a combination of a tuning fork and a grenade. What is that? Morty asked. Quantum faith disruptor, Rick replied. If these people think their machines are holy, let's see what happens when we make them question that belief. As the tanks closed in, the air trembled with static. The lead priest raised a mechadendrite chanting, "In the name of the Omnissiah, surrender your unholy device." Rick pressed the fork's base into the ground. Sorry, Wrenchface. I don't do surrender. He flicked the switch. A deep vibration rippled outward. For a moment, the battlefield glowed blue. And then, silence. The tanks stalled. Servos froze. Laser guns flickered out. Every machine spirit on the field screamed in mechanical agony as their faith-based circuitry collapsed. The tech priests fell to their knees, shrieking binary prayers that went unanswered. Morty's jaw dropped. Rick, you just broke their religion. Rick shrugged. Nah, Morty. I just rebooted it. Give it a century, and they'll worship me instead. Above, the heresy's end detected the disruption. The Inquisitor's voice cracked through the Vox. Purge the heretic. Deploy the angels of death. Rick sighed as he heard the sonic booms. Great. Now we get the deluxe edition from the sky. Drop pods streaked down like meteorites. They slammed into the ground, doors bursting open, revealing a squad of grey knights, space marines forged for one purpose, to destroy the demonic and the heretical. Their armor gleamed with purity seals. Their halberds glowed with psychic fire. One of them, the Justicar, stepped forward. Unregistered warp anomaly. Identify yourself. Rick raised his hands in mock surrender. Name's Rick Sanchez. I'm a multidimensional tourist, part-time god, full-time alcoholic. You must be the Jedi nuns I've been hearing about. The Justicar didn't respond. He charged. In an instant, the field became a blur of psychic energy and plasma bolts. Rick ducked, rolling behind a broken chimera hull. Morty screamed. Rick, they're gonna kill us, Rick muttered, pulling out a small flask. Not if I turn their souls into math first. He drank deeply, wiped his mouth, and slammed a cartridge into his portal gun. Time for some quantum heresy. He fired. The portal expanded like a sunburst, reality folding in on itself. The Grey Knights froze mid-strike as their halberds warped, twisting into liquid light. The air itself vibrated as the portal's edges bled red and violet. Rick stepped forward, coat whipping in the storm. You guys fight demons with faith. I fight gods with logic. Let's compare notes. And with that, the battlefield became something else entirely. A place where science and sanctity collided, where reality began to question which side it belonged to. The air screamed as reality tore itself apart. The Grey Knights' psychic halberds glowed red, their purity seals burned away by the friction between belief and logic. The portal Rick had unleashed pulsed like a living heart, stretching its edges across the battlefield until the sky itself seemed to fold inwards. Morty clutched his head, shouting over the howling wind. "Rick, what's happening?" Rick gritted his teeth as equations scrolled across his wrist device. "It's a feedback loop, Morty. Their faith-generated psychic field is trying to overwrite my portal's quantum framework. Two incompatible truths fighting for dominance." He adjusted the portal gun, sparks flying. "Basically, Morty, I'm arguing with the universe, and the universe is losing." The Grey Knights moved with machine-like precision, even as their surroundings twisted. Their leader, the Justicar, plunged his halberd into the ground, creating a dome of silver light. "The Emperor protects," he roared, and his brothers joined in, their collective faith forming a barrier of psychic purity that fought back the quantum storm. Rick laughed through the chaos. "Oh, that's adorable. You're literally using belief as firewall code." He flicked another switch, and suddenly the storm stabilized, half the battlefield frozen in golden light, the other half humming with cold blue energy. "Morty," Rick said, gesturing dramatically, "welcome to the interface between science and superstition." The Justicar stepped forward, his armor scorched, eyes glowing behind the helmet lenses. "You wield power beyond comprehension, heretic. Yet you lack faith. You are empty," Rick scoffed. "Empty? Buddy, I invented nihilism before your species learned fire. You worship a corpse in a golden chair. I drink with the laws of thermodynamics." The Justicar raised his weapon. "Then die as the unfaithful must." He charged, moving faster than Morty's eyes could follow. Rick didn't flinch. Instead, he aimed his wristband and pressed a button. Time bent. The Space Marine's charge slowed to a crawl, every movement dragging like molasses. Rick walked past him, sipping from his flask. "See, Morty, time manipulation's easy when you realize it's just another bad habit." He snapped his fingers, and the Grey Knight's halberd dissolved into vapor. "You guys really should stop relying on miracles," Rick said, shaking his head. "They've got a terrible return on investment." But before Rick could finish his smug speech, the ground beneath them cracked open. A red glow seeped through the fissures. The smell of sulfur filled the air. Morty's eyes widened. "Rick, what is that?" Rick froze. "That, Morty, is the other side of faith." The warp storm erupted, spilling forth twisted shapes. Demons of corn, blood-soaked and roaring. Drawn to the psychic chaos Rick had unleashed. Towering figures with blades of fire, faces made of screaming skulls, poured into reality. The Grey Knights turned in formation instantly, chanting battle hymns as their psychic halberds reignited. "By the Emperor's will, banish the abominations." Morty clung to Rick's lab coat. "You opened a door to hell, Rick," Rick groaned. "Technically, Morty, it's not hell. It's an extra-dimensional plane, powered by emotion and bad decisions. But yeah, close enough." The first demon lunged, a mountain of muscle and rage. Rick drew a small device that looked like a cross between a detonator and a tuning fork. He clicked it once, and a ripple of light vaporized the creature mid-charge. "Science, Morty. The only exorcism that works in every dimension." The battle intensified. Grey Knights fought with divine fury, bolters roaring, their armor shining under the warp's crimson light. Rick moved through the carnage like a surgeon, scanning energies, collecting samples, even pausing to comment on the demon's molecular instability. You see that, Morty? They're made of thought, not matter. Pure belief constructs. If I could bottle that, I could power an entire galaxy or sell it as an antidepressant. Morty ducked behind a wreck. Rick, this isn't funny. We're gonna die. Rick frowned. Morty, if I died every time a dimension got mad at me, I'd be a religion by now. Then suddenly, the warp light dimmed. The demons faltered. A shadow passed over the field. Rick looked up, and for once, even he hesitated. Descending from the clouds was a figure of molten gold and silver wings, radiant and terrible, a Primarch. The Justicar dropped to one knee. Lord Guilliman, Raboot Guilliman, Primarch of the Ultramarines and the living son of the Emperor, landed with a shockwave that sent debris flying. His eyes burned with blue fire, his expression carved from divinity and iron discipline. Report, he commanded, voice resonating like thunder. The Justicar bowed deeply. A heretic scientist from beyond the veil. He wields powers unknown. He has disrupted the machine spirits and summoned the warp's fury. Guilliman turned his gaze upon Rick. You are not of this galaxy, he said. Your presence is a contamination. Rick crossed his arms, unimpressed. Yeah, and you're the poster boy for daddy issues in a universe that worships bureaucracy. What's your point? The Primarch's jaw tightened. You mock the Imperium. You defy reason and faith alike, Rick smirked. Reason? Faith? Buddy, you're holding an empire together with duct tape made of prayer. I'm just here doing diagnostics. Guilliman took a step forward, each movement shaking the ground. You speak boldly for a mortal. Rick pulled out a cigarette and lit it. That's because I've met your kind before. Every civilization hits this point, Guilliman. The we are the chosen phase. Then some idiot like me shows up and reminds you that the universe doesn't care. He exhaled a cloud of smoke. Spoiler, I'm the idiot. The Primarch's sword ignited with holy flame. Then let us see if your nihilism shields you from the Emperor's wrath. The ground exploded as Guilliman lunged, blade striking faster than light. Rick deflected it with a projected barrier of shifting equations, the impact sending a shockwave across miles. Morty was thrown to the ground, clutching his ears. Rick grinned, eyes wild. Finally, someone worth arguing with. For minutes, the two clashed, godlike fury against cold intellect. Guilliman's blows carved craters in the earth, while Rick's defenses shimmered with colors that didn't exist in normal space. Every strike was a philosophy, every counter a thesis on chaos and order. Then Guilliman's sword pierced through Rick's barrier, grazing his arm. Blood spilled. Rick winced. Okay, that's new. You can actually hurt me here. The Primarch raised his blade again. Because this universe believes in consequences, scientist. Rick wiped the blood on his sleeve, smirking. Cute? I believe in upgrades. He pressed a button on his wristband. Instantly, nanites flooded from his coat, sealing the wound and amplifying his aura. Round 2, Glowboy. They collided again. Faith and logic, creation and entropy. The warp storm screamed around them, demons and soldiers alike falling silent to witness the duel. And as their blades, one forged by gods, one forged by genius, met in a blinding explosion, a new rift opened high above, shimmering with infinite colors. Rick's portal gun buzzed uncontrollably. Morty yelled, "Rick! The portal's opening again!" Rick's eyes narrowed. Not me this time, Morty. Someone else is dialing in. From within the swirling light, a voice echoed, deep, mocking, and ancient. Who dares meddle in my realm? Rick looked up, his smirk returning. Oh, great. Now the Chaos Gods want a word. The warp storm roared like a living beast. The voice that echoed through it was vast, oily, and cruel. It carried not through air, but through existence itself. Every molecule trembled. Morty clamped his hands over his ears, but the sound was inside his head, inside everything. Rick straightened up, staring into the roiling sky. Well, there it is, Morty. The peanut gallery of the cosmos, finally tuned in. The clouds above writhed, taking form, faces and shapes flickering in the chaos. Skulls made of stars, serpents woven from screams, 1,000 wings of light and rot. 4 presences pressed against reality, their voices blending and fighting at once. Khorne, Rick muttered, ticking them off on his fingers. Angry god of murder. Nurgle, god of mold and hugs. Tzeentch, the space peacock who thinks he's clever. And Slaanesh, the universe's most confusing midlife crisis. Great, the whole family showed up. The voice of Tzeentch slid like silk across the storm. Mortal, you tamper with forces beyond imagination. Your science has torn the veil. You seek to comprehend the incomprehensible. Rick smirked, lighting another cigarette. Buddy, I built a toaster that can comprehend the incomprehensible. You're just a glorified fever dream with feathers. Gilliman stepped forward, sword still blazing with holy fire. You are playing with damnation, Sanchez. The Chaos Gods feed on defiance. Rick waved him off. Relax, Junior Paladin. They're basically data clusters with personality disorders. Watch and learn. He pointed his portal gun toward the sky, adjusting the frequency to match the warp's psychic resonance. The weapon hummed, its edges bending light like molten glass. Morty peeked over the wreckage. Rick, are you seriously trying to talk to the Chaos Gods? Morty, Rick said, eyes flicking with manic focus, I'm not talking to them. I'm hacking them. The portal gun fired. A column of cold blue light piercing the heart of the warp storm. For an instant, the gods screamed in unison, their forms glitching like corrupted code. The entire sky flickered. Guilliman staggered back, shielding his eyes. What have you done? Rick grinned, sweat beading on his forehead. I just injected quantum structure into a metaphysical field. Translation. I gave the warp a nervous breakdown. Tzeentch's voice thundered, furious and distorted. Blasphemer, your logic cannot bind eternity. Yeah, Rick barked back. Tell that to my calculus. He twisted another dial, sending pulses through the atmosphere. The red lightning of Khorne fizzled into nothing. The sweet, rotting perfume of Nurgle's domain turned to sterile ozone. The warp itself began to shrink. Morty's eyes went wide. Rick, the sky, it's closing. Rick nodded. Good. Let it choke on its own paradox. But the victory lasted only a heartbeat. From the collapsing storm, a massive hand of molten darkness burst forth, clawing at the air. It was Khorne's fury made flesh, veins of fire running through armor forged from wars older than time. The voice was a roar that shattered mountains. Mortal, you dare mock the blood god? Rick blinked. Oh, you're one of the loud ones. He reached into his coat and pulled out what looked like a miniature black hole sealed in glass. Morty, hand me the anti-entropy modulator. Morty fumbled through the toolbox. Rick, what's an anti? The glowing thing that looks like it hates physics. Morty handed it over. Rick slammed it onto the device and threw it like a grenade. The sphere detonated silently, sucking light inward. The claw froze mid-motion, dissolving into grey dust that evaporated into nothing. Khorne's voice shrieked, fading into the void. Impossible! Rick exhaled a long breath. See, Morty, even gods obey thermodynamics when you twist the math right. Gilliman stared at him in disbelief. You destroyed a fragment of a chaos god. That should not be possible. Rick looked over, nonchalant. Neither should a talking corpse, running an empire for 10,000 years. But hey, here we are. The Primarch's jaw tightened. You wield power without restraint. You play with existence like a toy. Rick grinned. You say that like it's a bad thing. Before Gilliman could reply, another voice whispered, smooth, intoxicating, almost musical. Power is never bad, only wasted. And you, my darling, are far too interesting to waste. A shape rose from the dying storm, silver and violet, shimmering with impossible beauty. Slaanesh. Morty instantly hid behind Rick. Rick, what is that? Rick sighed. That's the problem child of the warp, Morty. The god of excess. Basically, if dopamine were a person. Slaanesh smiled, an androgynous vision of seduction and terror. You have tasted creation and defiance. You reshape reality as easily as I reshape desire. Why serve science when you could indulge perfection? Rick took a long drag from his cigarette. Flattered sparkle demon, but I don't do partnerships. Especially not with cosmic narcissists who think moaning counts as enlightenment. Slaanesh tilted their head, amused. You mock pleasure because you fear its depth. Rick raised a finger. No, I mock pleasure because you're one bad metaphor away from a perfume commercial. Gilliman intervened, voice booming. Begone, foul corruption! Slaanesh laughed, the sound warping the air. Even your angelic toy soldiers cannot purge what lies inside them, little demigod. Your emperor's dream reeks of repression. And this one... The god's eyes slid toward Rick. This one will one day understand that chaos is the only constant. Rick spat the cigarette into the dirt. Yeah, maybe. But until then, I'll keep being the variable. He raised his portal gun again, recalibrated it, and fired directly at Slaanesh. The beam didn't destroy, it reflected. It refracted the god's essence, splitting it into 1,000 versions of beauty, horror, and temptation that scattered like shards of glass. The warp fell silent. For the first time in eons, there were no gods speaking, only the faint hum of dying storms and the steady mechanical whir of Rick's devices. Gilliman stood stunned. The Justicar whispered, "He silenced the warp." Rick holstered the gun, brushing dust from his coat. "No, I didn't silence it. I muted it. There's a difference. Think of it as putting the multiverse on hold so I can think." Morty looked up at him, eyes wide with awe and fear. "Rick, you just beat gods." Rick's smile faded. "Morty, I didn't beat them. I outpaced them. Big difference. Power's never gone. It just waits for the next idiot to believe in it again." Gilliman sheathed his sword, stepping closer. "Then why are you here, Sanchez? What purpose brings a being like you to our cursed age?" Rick looked at the blood-soaked sky, now dimming to gray. His voice was quieter than usual. "Curiosity. I wanted to see if there was a universe where hope really could die and still function. Turns out, it's this one." The Primarch's expression softened, almost human. "And now that you've seen it," Rick adjusted his portal gun, the green energy humming back to life. "Now I leave before this place starts believing in me." He fired the portal open, a swirling gateway of green against the endless ash. But before stepping through, he turned back to Gilliman. "Word of advice, Blue Boy. Stop worshipping dead men. They make terrible bosses." Morty stepped in behind him, trembling but relieved. "Can we please go somewhere with less apocalypse?" Rick smirked. Sure thing, Morty. Next stop, anywhere but here. As the portal closed, Gilliman watched the rippling air fade. For a long time, he said nothing. Then he turned to the horizon, where the remnants of the warp storm still flickered faintly. Even gods, he murmured, fear men like him. And above the silent battlefield, unseen by both, the faint laughter of Tzinch echoed once more, not in rage this time, but in amusement. For Rick Sanchez had changed the rules. And in the Warhammer 40,000 universe, that was the most dangerous act of all. Rick's arrival had not gone unnoticed by the Imperium. Deep within the data fortresses of Mars, the Adeptus Mechanicus detected a spike in noospheric interference, readings that defied every known law of the Omnissiah's physics. A single word rippled through encrypted Vox channels. Here, Tech. Whatever this intruder was, he wielded science indistinguishable from sorcery. On Terra, the High Lords convened in uneasy silence as a mechanized projection flickered before them, a distorted image of Rick's portal gun. Unregistered technology, intoned a tech priest. Non-sanctioned dimensional manipulation. Probability of chaos corruption, 83%. The Inquisition was already on the move. Meanwhile, Rick, blissfully unconcerned about the bureaucratic apocalypse he had triggered, was busy mapping warp currents. His ship hovered over the industrial hellscape of Armageddon, scanning for energy signatures. Yup, classic fascist empire, he muttered, sipping from a metallic flask labeled, "Don't drink quantum fuel." All skulls, fire, and overcompensation. Morty, if this place had a Tinder profile, it'd say, emotionally unavailable, into genocide. Morty winced as an orbital bombardment shook the clouds below. Rick, that's not funny. There's people down there. Yeah, well, people is a strong word for a civilization that worships a corpse, Morty, Rick replied, tapping at his wrist console. I mean, don't get me wrong. I'm not here to fix their religion. I'm here to find out how they weaponized belief itself. Because to Rick, the warp wasn't just a nightmare dimension. It was a field of collective consciousness, a tangible manifestation of thought and emotion, like a cosmic-scale neural network. If one could stabilize it, even harness it, the potential was infinite. Infinite power, infinite creation, infinite beer. But as he dove deeper into his experiments, the universe began to notice him back. The first to reach him wasn't the Imperium, it was the ruinous powers. From within the warp, the Chaos Gods stirred. Khorne's laughter echoed like thunder through the immaterium. A mortal who bent reality without faith or fury was a threat to his brutal hierarchy. Tzinch, however, was amused. A mind unbound by order or devotion, the changer of ways mused. Perhaps the multiverse sends me a kindred spirit. One night, as Rick tinkered with his dimensional stabilizer, the air in his lab thickened. Morty froze. Rick, why is it getting dark inside the ship? Rick didn't look up. Relax, Morty. It's just a localized warp breach. Happens when reality gets jealous. Then a voice, smooth, serpentine, and impossibly vast, slithered through the air. You defy the currents of the warp, mortal. Who are you to trespass in the domain of gods? Rick sighed. Oh, great. It's one of you four cosmic toddlers. Which one is this, huh? The bird guy? The blood guy? The horny one? Morty's eyes widened. Rick, don't... Or maybe the one who's into disease and mucus. Sorry, dude, I can't keep your cult straight. A swirl of prismatic flame erupted before them, and an avian form emerged, a lord of change, one of Tzinch's greater demons, wings like living fractals. You meddle in threads you do not understand, it hissed. Your science is illusion. The warp obeys no logic. Rick took a long drink. Yeah, well, my hangovers obey no mercy, so we're both breaking the rules here. With a flick of his portal gun, he fired a quantum anchor into the daemon's chest. The creature screamed, not in pain, but in disbelief. Its essence flickered, bound momentarily by a tether of stabilized reality. Rick grinned. Congratulations, Big Bird. You're my first warp specimen. Morty gasped. Rick, you can't just… That thing's alive. Alive is relative, Morty. In this universe, being alive just means your molecules haven't decided to worship something yet. The demon dissolved in a cyclone of color, its last words echoing through the lab. He will see you, scientist. He will see you soon. For the first time in a long while, Rick paused. He didn't like being noticed. Still, the experiment was a success. He had found a way to manipulate warp energy without faith, by converting it into a measurable quantum frequency. A discovery that, if applied correctly, could rewrite the fabric of the galaxy. But that also meant the galaxy would try to kill him before he finished. The Inquisition tracked his energy signatures to the planet below. Dozens of Valkyrie gunships screamed across the sky, deploying stormtroopers in black carapace armor. At their head was Inquisitor Valen Mordrake, a man whose reputation for purging the unknown bordered on myth. Target designation, Anomalous Xenos Technologist, Mordrake ordered. By decree of the Ordo Xenos, he is to be captured for interrogation or terminated. As the troops breached Rick's lab, the walls shimmered into static holograms. Rick's voice echoed from a speaker above. Hey, guys! You're a little early for open house. I usually do the whole mad scientist tour on Tuesdays. Explosions rippled through the base. The Inquisitors barely escaped before the facility imploded into a miniature wormhole. Rick and Morty were already light years away. On board the ship, Morty clutched his head. Ah, Rick, they're sending armies after us. Whole planets. You said we were just observing. Rick shrugged. Observation's just a polite word for poking the universe until it screams back, Morty. It's science. Science? You just kidnapped a demon from hell. Rick looked up from his console, expression suddenly serious. Yeah. And if that thing was right, Morty, something's coming. Something that even I might not be able to portal away from. For once, Morty didn't interrupt. Because deep in the warp, Tzeentch wasn't angry. He was curious. He began whispering Rick's name through the minds of psychers across the galaxy, twisting prophecy and fate to converge on one impossible truth. A mortal who could cheat chaos. And in the grim darkness of the far future, that was a heresy unlike any other. As the whispers spread, the Adeptus Mechanicus began calling him the Paradox Engineer. The Inquisition branded him the Anathema Scientist. But in the darkest depths of the Eye of Terror, where gods and demons schemed in eternal war, a new prophecy was written. From beyond the stars shall come a traveler of minds, whose logic unravels faith, whose laughter breaks gods. And through him, the warp shall tremble. Rick Sanchez, the man who had mocked death, defied infinity, and insulted a demon to its face, had just become a cosmic variable even the Emperor hadn't calculated. And across the stars, the game was only beginning. The warp storms grew restless. Across the galaxy, psychers screamed as their visions filled with spirals of equations, gears, and laughing echoes that weren't quite mortal. Entire astropathic networks burned out overnight, broadcasting a single word before collapsing into madness. Rick. Inquisitor Mordrake stood before a flickering hololith in his battle barge, Sanctity of Iron, face illuminated by static blue light. The feed replayed the impossible. Rick's laboratory folding into itself like origami, then vanishing entirely. He manipulates the fabric of the Imperium without psychic focus, the tech priest beside him croaked. This is blasphemy against the Omnissiah's logic. Blasphemy? Mordrake muttered, eyes narrowing. No, Magos. This is war. He turned to his retinue. Prepare an exterminator's petition. If this paradox engineer returns to Imperial soil, no world shall harbor him. Meanwhile, Rick's ship drifted in the void between systems, shielded by quantum cloaking. Inside, Morty sat slumped against the wall, staring at a jar filled with swirling pink vapor, the captured warp residue from the Lord of Change. "Ah, Rick," Morty said softly, "it's whispering again. I heard my name this time. It said it could make me see things." Rick didn't look up. He was calibrating his portal gun against a complex lattice of data, warp fields, emotion frequencies, and something resembling neuron pathways. Yeah, ignore it. The warp's just a big psychic internet, Morty. Everyone's trying to scam you into a pyramid scheme of souls. Rick, I don't think it's a scam. It knows stuff about us. Rick finally turned, eyes cold, behind his usual haze of sarcasm. Of course it does, Morty. It's built on thought. Every fear, every memory, every embarrassing thing you've ever done in the bathroom. The warp has it archived. The real trick is not caring. Morty gulped. That's your plan? Just not care? Rick smirked. It's worked for me so far. But even as he spoke, the lights flickered. The air thickened. Reality trembled as if taking a deep breath. And then suddenly, the ship wasn't alone. A figure appeared within the main deck, surrounded by radiant gold light. 7 feet tall, cloaked in robes of living flame, bearing a staff that hummed with restrained psychic energy. "Rick Sanchez," the being said, voice echoing like 1,000 souls speaking as one. "You trespass upon the Emperor's galaxy. You meddle with forces you cannot comprehend." Morty screamed, ducking behind a console. "Ah, Rick, that's what is that?" Rick squinted. Golden armor, overcompensating aura, vaguely self-righteous tone. Oh, great. A space wizard Jesus. Let me guess, Custodes, or one of those Imperial psychers with a stick up there? "I am Malcador's shadow," the being interrupted, eyes burning. "A fragment of the Sigillite's will, bound in the Imperium. I come as warning," and Judgment Rick took a swig from his flask. "Cool story, bro. You're like a force ghost, but with extra paperwork." The entity ignored the mockery. "The warp has taken notice of you. The changer of ways whispers your name to his thralls. Even the corpse upon the throne stirs faintly, feeling your ripple in the tapestry. You risk unraveling what remains of order." "Good," Rick said, flicking a switch. "Order's overrated." The shadow's eyes blazed. "You are not a god. You are not welcome." Rick pointed the portal gun directly at it. "Yeah, well, I'm not asking for hospitality." The room exploded in light. When the flash cleared, the shadow was gone, dispersed, perhaps banished. But Morty noticed something terrible. The walls of the ship seemed to breathe. The warp was bleeding in. "Rick, the ship's melting." Rick's tone remained calm, almost detached. "No, Morty, it's adapting. That psychic echo wasn't trying to kill us. It tagged us, like a beacon. The warp's locking onto our frequency." He started typing faster than Morty could follow. Equations danced across the screen. "If I can sync our ship's reality phase with the warp wave's harmonic field, we can ride the boundary layer." Morty blinked. "In English, Rick." "We're surfing hell, Morty." The ship lurched violently as Rick punched the throttle. The stars outside stretched into ribbons of color, but instead of the smooth tunnel of portal travel, this was chaos incarnate. Screaming faces, twisted beasts, storms of emotion. The warp itself surged against the hull like a living ocean. Morty screamed. Rick laughed, and through the madness, something vast watched. When the ship finally stabilized, they emerged not in real space, but in orbit, over a shattered world, a planet of floating ruins, suspended between matter and immaterium. Rick looked out the viewport, eyebrows raised. Well, Morty, looks like we took a wrong turn at sanity and ended up in the neighborhood of cosmic depression. Morty gasped. Where are we? Rick checked his scanner. Judging by the metaphysical radiation, I'd say Prospero, or what's left of it. He stepped onto the cracked soil moments later, flask in hand. The air shimmered with psychic echoes, whispers of the thousand suns, still lamenting their fate. Rick crouched, scooping up dust that glowed faintly blue. Residual psychic decay. The warp here's basically an open wound. Perfect test site. Morty stared in horror. Rick, this was a planet once. You can still hear them screaming. Yeah, well, that's history for you. Never shuts up. As he set up his equipment, a shadow loomed across the ruins. Massive, crimson, crowned with horns. A being of immense power and hatred stepped forth. A demon prince, its voice thunderous and amused. Sanchez, it growled, each syllable dripping with malice. You toy with things beyond mortal right. I am Magnus the Red. This world is mine. Rick didn't flinch. Magnus, huh? You're taller than your Wikipedia page suggested. Magnus glared, psychic energy burning in his single eye. You mock me? Rick held up his portal gun, calibrating it with the air's warp frequency. Oh no, I'm just collecting data. You're basically a case study in what happens when wizards skip therapy. Magnus roared. You dare insult a Primarch? Buddy, Rick said with a grin, I insult gods before breakfast. The demon prince unleashed a psychic storm, reality twisting into fire and glass. But Rick, unfazed, flicked a dial, and the storm froze mid-air, suspended in a quantum lock. Magnus's expression faltered. Impossible. Rick blew smoke from his gun. You're dealing with science, not sorcery. Big difference, Morty. Cowering behind a rock, peeked out. Rick, you just froze a Primarch. Yeah, Morty. And if he stays still long enough, I might actually learn how to build a god without believing in one. But even as Rick gloated, Magnus began to smile. Slowly, knowingly. You think yourself outside fate, little man, he whispered, but Tzeentch is never truly defied. Every choice you make is already part of his design. Rick's smirk wavered for just a second. We'll see about that. He turned to Morty. Let's get out of here. I've got what I need. As the portal flared open and they vanished, Magnus's laughter echoed through the ruins, a sound that rippled across the warp, reaching ears both divine and damned. And somewhere in the golden silence of the Imperial Palace, the Emperor's eyes flickered, not open, but aware. In the depths of the Imperial Palace, where 10,000 golden statues watched over a silent god, a flicker of movement disturbed the stillness. For a fraction of a second, the Emperor's psychic aura rippled, a wave so faint that only the most attuned of the Adeptus Custodes noticed. Captain General Trajan Valoris stood before the golden throne, armor gleaming like dawnlight, his expression unflinching. Yet within him, a rare unease stirred. You felt that too, murmured a custodian beside him. The throne, it moved. Valoris nodded slowly, the Master stirs. Something has disrupted the warp's balance reports, flooded in from across the galaxy. Demons behaving erratically, warp storms calming in one sector, only to flare violently in another, and astropathic relays picking up strange mathematical sequences embedded in the psychic static. Equations, not prayers. Equations that described warp energy as if it were a physics problem. The words of one frightened psyker echoed through the Vox before he disintegrated mid-transmission. He's teaching the warp how to think. Elsewhere, Rick's ship coasted through the shattered remnants of Prospero's orbit. Morty paced nervously, glancing at the pulsating device on the table, a sphere of light, swirling with impossible colors. Rick, are you sure it's safe keeping that thing here? It feels like it's looking at me. Rick didn't look up from his tools. Relax, Morty. It's not looking at you, it's mapping you. That's how the warp processes consciousness, by running endless simulations of possible yous. You're basically an open-source life form now. Morty groaned. That's not better, Rick. Rick tightened the last bolt and stepped back. Yeah, well, neither's living in a universe where emotion is a power source. I'm just giving physics a fighting chance. He activated the device. Instantly, the ship was flooded with light, but not blinding, more like the calm glow of 1,000 synchronized thoughts. The air vibrated softly. Every molecule hummed in harmony, as if logic itself had found a rhythm. Morty whispered, awestruck, What? What is that? Rick smiled faintly. That, Morty, is the bridge between reality and belief. I just stabilized a section of the warp without using faith, fear, or sacrifice. I call it rationalium. Yeah, it's like the anti-warp. Instead of feeding off emotions, it feeds off understanding. The more consistent your logic, the stronger it gets. I basically just hacked God's source code. But as the light pulsed, shadows formed at the edge of the room. Whispering voices twisted through the air, mocking, seductive, enraged. The warp was responding, rejecting this intrusion. And far away, in the impossible citadel of crystal and madness, Sanchez stirred. His 1,000 eyes blinked open, each one showing a different possible future. And in every one, Rick Sanchez stood defiant, his laughter bending probability itself. How curious, the Changer of Ways mused, a mortal who creates certainty within chaos, a paradox wrapped in flesh and science. Let us see how long his reason survives the storm. He extended a single, clawed hand into reality. Rick was the first to sense it. His instrument spiked, readings spiraling off the charts. "Oh, crap," he muttered. "We've got a big one incoming." Warp fields destabilizing. Morty clung to a console. "Rick, what's happening? Is it—" Before he could finish, the ship's hull screamed. The rationalium sphere cracked open like an egg, spilling pure psychic light. From within, the storm stepped a colossal kaleidoscopic being, ever-changing, ever laughing. "Rick Sanchez," it thundered, its voice both a whisper and an explosion. "You have built walls within my realm. Do you think logic can defy destiny?" Rick stared up at Sanchez, unfazed. "Oh, hey, bird brain. You finally decided to stop sending your middle managers?" Morty gawked. Rick. That's him. The god of change. The one who controls fate." Rick twirled his flask lazily. "Yeah, well, fate's overrated. It's just bad programming." The god's laughter shook the stars. "Your arrogance will undo you. Every calculation, every invention. I foresaw it before your species learned to stand upright." Rick took a drag from a half-burnt cigarette, exhaled, and shrugged. "Then you already know how this ends." And with that, he fired his portal gun directly into Sanchez's chest. The blast wasn't light or fire, but possibility. It tore through layers of reality, rewriting quantum constants in real time. The god howled as his form destabilized, not destroyed, but quantized, his essence reduced into observable data. Morty fell to his knees, shielding his face. Rick, you can't kill a chaos god. Rick's tone was eerily calm. I'm not killing him, Morty. I'm measuring him. And the moment you measure something, it loses its chaos. For an instant, Sanchez' infinite laughter fell silent. His form stilled, frozen between identities. Then, with a shattering cry, he fractured, scattering across the void like shards of broken prophecy. The ship's systems went dead. Rick stood amidst the smoke, staring at the fragments of light drifting through the cabin. Well, he muttered, that was easier than expected. Morty trembled. You just beat a god. Rick sighed. Yeah, and that's the problem. The warp's like an ecosystem, Morty. You remove one apex predator, the rest mutate to fill the gap. Already, the shadows outside were shifting, merging, evolving. The warp screamed as it tried to correct itself, birthing new horrors to replace what Rick had broken. Morty grabbed Rick's arm. Rick, we need to get out of here. Rick didn't move. His gaze was fixed on the rationalium core, now glowing brighter than before, stable, stronger, feeding on the very chaos around it. No, Morty, we're not running. We're finishing this. He reached for the console and input a new sequence. You see, Morty, these gods feed on emotion, fear, rage, hope, desire. But what happens when a whole galaxy stops believing? What if I replace faith with comprehension? Rick, I'm going to upload rationalium into the new sphere. Rewire the warp itself. No more gods, no more chaos. Just thought, order, and infinite understanding. Morty's eyes widened. You're gonna delete religion? Rick smirked. I'm gonna upgrade it. He pressed the final key. The rationalium engine roared to life, sending waves of structured logic into the Imperium. Across the galaxy, demons screamed as their forms unraveled into equations. Cultists fell silent mid-prayer. Psychers felt their powers flicker, their minds clearing for the first time in history. And high upon the golden throne, the Emperor's soul trembled, not in fear, but in recognition. He had felt this once before, in the age before men worshipped him. A mind like his own, a creator, a breaker of laws. And in that moment, the Emperor smiled, for the first time in 10,000 years. The battle over the Forge world of Griffon 4 had been raging for 72 hours when Rick finally decided he was bored. He'd already watched the Imperium's ground forces clash with an orc wah, and had taken notes on the crude yet efficient orcish grasp of physics-defying propulsion. They call it believing hard enough, he muttered, fascinated. That's not stupidity. That's reality manipulation via consensus. These green idiots are running on mimetic quantum fields. I love it. He warped directly into the midst of an orc mechboy workshop, where dozens of greenskins were hammering together a gargantuan, oil-slicked engine. All right, fellas, Rick said, stepping over a sparking wire. I see potential. What you guys need is direction. Maybe a little interdimensional consulting. The mech stared for a heartbeat before erupting in laughter. One massive knob raised a wrench the size of a surfboard. He's a weedy humie. Squash him, Rick sighed. Typical. He pressed a button on his wristband and instantly split into 3 holographic duplicates, each holding a modified plasma gun. Let's test Newton's third law of shut up. The workshop lit up in electric blue light as the duplicates fired. When the smoke cleared, only one orc was left standing, massive, scarred, and grinning. You got the spirit, Humie, it growled. You's got the wah in ya. Rick paused, then grinned. You know what? Maybe I do. Over the next several hours, by Imperial time, Rick became a myth among orcs. His ability to build, repair, and annihilate faster than any mech earned him the title "Der smartest Git in the Galaxy." He redesigned their trucks with warp-reactive hulls, built gargants that teleported short distances mid-charge, and even brewed a liquid stimulant that made them believe harder in their own invincibility. The result was catastrophic. A wave of unprecedented power surged across 3 sectors, and Rick was right at the center of it, a scientist god to an army of bellowing brutes. Yet even as he reveled in the chaos, something nagged at him. The orcs didn't just fight, they fed on it. The psychic energy of their belief echoed across dimensions, resonating with something enormous and hungry. Rick set up a quick analysis through his goggles, running readings across the warp. The results chilled him. Oh, crap. You're kidding me. These idiots are powering the Chaos Gods by thinking really hard about violence. That realization broke his enthusiasm. He decided to vanish mid-battle, leaving the orcs to their mayhem. Moments later, he was back aboard the Portal Express, pacing furiously. Morty, they're running a quantum entropic feedback loop between belief, violence, and warp energy. It's like feeding entropy a steroid smoothie. If the orcs ever get organized, the entire galaxy could collapse into a single, screaming probability field. Morty blinked, wide-eyed. So what are we gonna do, Rick? What do we do? Nothing. What I'm gonna do is fix this. I've seen enough dumb civilizations collapse under their own stupidity. This one's unique. It's actively weaponizing dumbness. Rick plotted a course for the Segmentum Solar, heading straight toward the Imperium's bureaucratic heart. His next target, Mars, the red planet that served as home to the Adeptus Mechanicus. If I'm going to understand how this place hasn't imploded yet, I need to meet the only people here who might be dumber than orcs but smarter than humans, tech priests. When he arrived, the Martian atmosphere shimmered with electromagnetic storms. Titans towered like gods of metal, their reactor cores glowing in the crimson haze. Rick disguised himself as a wandering magos, wearing a self-generating hood that constantly muttered binary prayers. It worked flawlessly. Within an hour, he was inside a vast cathedral of steel, surrounded by chanting priests, reciting sacred algorithms. At the center of the hall stood a colossal machine, a golden humanoid form suspended in chains of light. The Omnissiah's prototype, one of the priests murmured reverently, a fragment of the machine god's consciousness. Rick squinted. His scanner lit up instantly. Oh, come on. That's a localized fragment of the Emperor's neural signature, running on backup warp energy. You guys literally worship a brain echo. Blasphemy, several priests hissed, turning toward him. Rick raised a hand. Relax, relax. I'm not here to start a religious war. Already seen enough of those. I just want to understand how your system hasn't exploded from paradoxical code redundancy. They didn't understand a word, of course, but they did escort him, under heavy guard, to one of the inner sanctums. Inside, Rick found something truly fascinating, an ancient device connected to the noosphere, the shared machine mind of Mars. He jacked in without hesitation. Data flooded his consciousness. Billions of lines of code, rituals, schematics, and suppressed histories. And buried deep within it, Rick found a secret file labeled Terra Prime, access restricted. He decrypted it in seconds. What he found stunned him. The Adeptus Mechanicus had fragments of pre-imperial technology preserved from the dark age of technology that hinted at humanity once mastering interdimensional travel, the very thing Rick himself used, but their religion had buried it under superstition. The Emperor, once a man of science, had let it rot to maintain control. When Rick disconnected, his face was pale. So that's it. This whole civilization's built on a lie. They've got the tools to rebuild the universe, and they're too scared to use them because they turned science into faith. He left Mars quietly, but his mind was racing. If he could find a way to reintroduce true scientific thinking into the Imperium, maybe he could reverse millennia of decay. Or maybe he'd just break everything faster. Either option sounded fun. But his experiments on the orcs had already drawn attention. Across the warp, a shadow stirred, a flicker of consciousness older than time itself. It whispered his name through demonic tongues, curious, amused, hungry. Sanchez, the changer of ways, had noticed Rick Sanchez. The chaos god of knowledge and manipulation found him fascinating, a mortal mind that rivaled the warp's own unpredictability. A being of infinite logic dancing in entropy, Sanchez mused. How delicious. Rick, of course, felt the ripple in the warp almost immediately. Oh crap, he muttered. Now the magical bird brain's interested in me. Perfect. Just what I needed. Another omnipotent jerk who thinks he's clever. Morty looked terrified. Rick, can he find us? Rick shrugged. Depends. I've scrambled our dimensional coordinates, but the warp isn't bound by causality, so technically he's already found us before he started looking. Yeah, it's that kind of logic. The ship's alarms wailed as warp signatures flared around them. Morty, Rick said calmly, strapping himself in, looks like we're about to meet the closest thing this universe has to a god who cheats at chess. And as the warp tore open before them, in a storm of kaleidoscopic fire, a vast, many-eyed form began to emerge, smiling through 1,000 realities. The warp storm that erupted before Rick's ship was like nothing he'd ever seen. Every color existed and didn't exist at once, bending into a fractal nightmare of geometry and thought. Morty clutched his seat, screaming as the ship buckled under psychic pressure. Rick, on the other hand, looked mildly annoyed. Yeah, I get it. You're cosmic, you're infinite, you're mysterious. Can we skip the light show? A voice boomed through the void, rich and layered, echoing across dimensions. Rick Sanchez, you trespass in the realm of possibility itself. Rick rolled his eyes. And you're Sanchez, the chaos god of I know everything but I won't tell you. You're basically Reddit, with feathers. Reality rippled, as laughter, or something like it, shook the warp. The image before him coalesced into an immense avian silhouette, wings spanning galaxies, eyes shifting through futures and pasts. You mock me, yet you stand at the edge of truth. You have touched the strands of fate and refuse to be bound. You are, in your way, a god of change. Rick smirked. Nah, I'm just a guy who hates being bored. You manipulate people with prophecy and chaos. I manipulate physics with liquor and genius. Big difference. Sanchez leaned closer, his form reshaping every time Rick blinked. Join me, mortal. Imagine the multiverse under your control. Together, we could unravel the Emperor's false order. You could shape galaxies like clay. Rebuild this reality not with faith, but with insight. Morty's voice trembled. Rick, maybe don't, make deals with the giant demon bird. Rick ignored him. Tempting pitch, bird boy. But here's the thing. You and I both know that omnipotence is the fastest way to lose your sense of humor. You've been running your little chaos experiment for 10,000 years, and look where it's got you. Stuck in the same four-dimensional fish tank, talking to nerds like Magnus who think you're their best friend. Sanchez' thousand eyes blinked in unison. And what have you accomplished, Rick Sanchez? You run from universe to universe, mocking creation. You hide behind cynicism because you fear meaning. Rick's smirk faded for a moment. He opened another flask, took a long drink, and said quietly, "Meaning is overrated. The universe doesn't care. The trick is learning to laugh at it before it laughs at you." The chaos. God's voice softened, almost curious. Even you, for all your intellect, cannot exist without purpose. Everything that creates must believe in something. Rick chuckled. I believe in entropy. It never disappoints me. Then, in an instant, he acted. A pulse of pure white light erupted from his portal gun, amplified by a cube of stabilized anti-warp energy, a device he'd been building since his first encounter with the Imperium. The energy detonated across the warp, like a logical paradox made manifest, collapsing Sanchez' projection into a cascade of distorted time. Sanchez roared, his form fracturing across infinite realities. You dare to define order in my domain? Rick gritted his teeth as his ship shuddered. Not define it, measure it. I just quantified chaos at a quantum level. Congratulations, you're now a math problem. The god's laughter twisted into fury. The warp folded in on itself, a storm of raw willpower trying to crush the ship. Morty screamed, Rick, we're not gonna make it. Relax, Morty, Rick barked, flipping switches faster than any human could see. I'm cross-phasing our molecular pattern through a temporal echo of reality where we already survived. The ship flickered out of the warp, just as it imploded, emerging above a planet shrouded in ash and ruin. Cadia, or what was left of it. The sky burned with perpetual fire, and the shattered remains of the Blackstone pylons jutted from the ground like gravestones. Rick exhaled, sweat dripping from his brow. Okay, that was close. Too close. We're done playing Godbird games. Morty stared out the window. Rick, what is this place? Former Fortress World. Used to be the Imperium's pride and joy until it got Thanos snapped by the Eye of Terror. Perfect example of human stubbornness. Even after the planet cracked in half, they still said it stood firm. They landed among the ruins. Rick wandered the rubble, scanning for warp residue. His readings spiked off the charts. Unbelievable. The energy density here is higher than a dying neutron star. The boundary between reality and warp is basically tissue paper. Morty picked up a shattered Aquila insignia, brushing dust off. It's kinda sad, Rick. All these people died believing they were protecting something good. Rick didn't respond immediately. He stared at the horizon, where the warp shimmered like a wound. Belief's a dangerous drug, Morty. It gets civilizations to build cathedrals or burn them. Suddenly, his scanner pinged. A faint life sign was buried beneath the debris. Rick used a micro-displacer to lift a slab of ferrocrete, revealing a lone figure, a woman in battered power armor, her skin pale but alive. The insignia on her shoulder was unmistakable, an inquisitor. Her eyes snapped open, locking onto Rick. You are not Mechanicus, nor Astartes. Identify yourself. Rick crouched down. Name's Rick Sanchez, dimension traveler, scientist, professional nihilist, and you are? Inquisitor Lyra Voss, she rasped. You stand on holy ground, Zeno. Rick chuckled. Lady, the ground's cracked in half and leaking warp fumes. Holy isn't the word I'd use. She tried to rise, but collapsed. Rick sighed and injected her with a stabilizing serum. Don't thank me. I'm just bored. Besides, you might be useful. Lyra glared. You mock the Imperium, yet you wear no mark of chaos. What are you? Rick stood. A scientist. The last kind your species knew, before you replaced thinking with worship. That line hit harder than he expected. The Inquisitor looked away, shame flickering behind her eyes. We preserved what we could. The Emperor's light is all that keeps humanity from annihilation. Rick folded his arms. Maybe. Or maybe the Emperor's the problem. You've built a prison out of faith and called it safety. I've seen universes like this. They always collapse. Before she could respond, the air grew cold. The warp shimmered again. A tear opened above them, lightning bleeding from the sky. A voice, Sanchez' voice, echoed faintly. You cannot escape pattern, Rick Sanchez. Change is eternal. Rick gritted his teeth. Oh, great, he's following us. Like an obsessive ex-girlfriend with omnipotence, he turned to Lyra. You want to live? Help me find a way to re-stabilize reality around this planet. If we don't, the warp's going to eat this galaxy from the inside out. She hesitated, then nodded grimly. For the Imperium, and for the Emperor. Rick groaned. Yeah. Whatever helps you sleep at night. Just don't start chanting. They began scavenging through the ruins, assembling a network of warp dampeners and energy converters. Morty, carrying tools twice his size, muttered, Rick, this is insane. We're working with an Inquisitor now. Rick smirked. Morty, in this universe, insanity is the only thing that makes sense. Besides, she's useful, and she shoots better than you. Overhead, the warp storm pulsed brighter, watching. Sanchez whispered again, his voice everywhere and nowhere. You cannot build logic where there is only change. The moment you define order, you become my servant. Rick looked up, eyes blazing. You've never met anyone like me, have you? I don't define order. I weaponize it. And as the ground trembled beneath them, the device began to hum, a lattice of blue-white energy forming above Cadia's ruins, cutting through the warp like a scalpel. The battle for the galaxy's sanity had begun. The lattice of light over Cadia pulsed brighter, weaving geometric patterns into the darkened sky. The warp shimmered and fought against it, twisting space like a wounded beast. Rick stood at the center of the storm, coat whipping in the wind, eyes reflecting 1,000 colors of impossible energy. Morty clung to a broken pillar nearby, shouting over the noise. Rick, are you sure this is going to work? Rick's grin was wild. Morty, I'm never sure. I'm right. There's a difference, Inquisitor Lyra Voss, kneeling beside a glowing console salvaged from a crashed Valkyrie, read off fluctuating data streams. Power output is exceeding containment. You'll rupture the fabric of reality before you stabilize it. Rick smirked, twisting a dial on his gauntlet. Lady, that's the idea. Reality's been running on a broken operating system for 10,000 years. I'm just giving it a hard reboot. As the machine roared to life, arcs of blue plasma licked across the ruins. The warp clouds above them coiled, taking shape, eyes, wings, and shifting symbols forming out of raw madness. Sanchez' laughter echoed across time and matter alike. You would heal the wound by tearing it wider. How very human. Rick shouted into the storm. I'm not human, you omnidimensional parrot. I'm an engineer. He slammed a crystalline core into the central housing. The lattice expanded, stretching across Cadia's orbit like a net of pure logic. Every pulse tore a piece of the warp away, revealing starlight beneath the chaos. For the first time since its destruction, Cadia's skies began to clear. Morty's jaw dropped. Rick, you're fixing it. You're actually fixing a planet. Rick snorted. Please, I'm not fixing anything. I'm unbreaking it. But the victory was short-lived. The laughter grew louder, deeper. The air turned heavy with psychic energy, pressing against their lungs. The ground split open, and out of the fissure rose a figure of impossible proportions. An avatar of Tzeentch, its form forever changing. Feathers, fire, crystal, and smoke, all shifting between shapes too fast to comprehend. Rick Sanchez, it intoned, you cannot kill a concept. I am the truth of change itself. Even your science is mine. For knowledge evolves, mutates, becomes. Rick raised his portal gun, its barrel glowing like a small sun. Yeah, but concepts can be contained, buddy. I built your cage before you even noticed the lock. The avatar struck, its claws made of pure causality. Rick triggered a temporal distortion field, freezing the moment mid-swing. He moved like a blur, installing 3 anchors around the god's projection. Each one pulsed with anti-warp coding, designed to phase chaos out of this dimension entirely. Lyra stared in awe. By the Emperor, you're fighting a god. Rick smirked without looking back. Lady, I've dated gods. They're worse than this. Morty ducked as debris flew overhead. Rick, hurry up. Relax, Morty. Just got to recalibrate for multidimensional feedback. And he flinched as a beam of pure warp light ripped across the sky, slicing through one of the anchors. Ah, great. He's adapting. Tzeentch's voice filled every molecule of air. You cannot comprehend infinity, yet you dare to edit it. Rick pulled a vial from his coat, glowing with pale blue liquid. That's where you're wrong. I don't need to comprehend infinity. I just need to hack it. He smashed the vial into the console. The containment lattice surged with impossible energy, fueled by the distilled essence of his own portal fluid, a chemical that existed in all realities at once. The result was instantaneous. The lattice folded inward, imploding into a singular pulse that rippled across the warp like a shockwave. The avatar screamed, not in pain, but in confusion, as the laws of physics rewrote themselves around it. For a heartbeat, everything froze. And then, silence. The warp clouds dissipated. The sky cleared completely, revealing a field of stars untouched by corruption. The air felt still for the first time in millennia. Cadia's ruins glowed faintly with residual energy, stabilized by Rick's machine. Morty peeked out from behind a boulder. Did we win? Rick stared up at the sky, exhaling slowly. Define win. I just kicked 1/4 of a pantheon in the teeth and patched a hole in reality. But the universe, it's still a dumpster fire. Lyra approached cautiously, limping from the blast. What you've done here, it defies everything we know. You've accomplished what the Mechanicus deemed impossible. Rick shrugged. Yeah, well, that's what happens when you replace worship with math. He turned to leave, activating his portal gun. But Lyra called out, Wait, you could stay. Help us rebuild. The Imperium needs minds like yours. Rick paused for a moment. For once, he looked thoughtful. The Imperium doesn't need me, Inquisitor. It needs therapy. With a flick of his wrist, he opened a swirling green portal. Morty followed, glancing back one last time at the broken world, now glowing with faint life. So, Rick, what happens now? You just, leave them to figure it out? Rick stepped through the portal halfway, speaking without turning around. That's the thing about this universe, Morty. You can't fix belief. You can only prove it wrong, and hope they learn something before it kills them. They vanished, the portal snapping shut behind them. For a long while, the silence of Cadia endured. The warp storms had receded, the stars shone steady once more. Inquisitor Lyra Voss stood among the ruins, staring at the sky, whispering to herself, "The Emperor protects, but perhaps so does knowledge." Meanwhile, in the depths of the Imperium, ripples spread outward from the place where Rick had fought Tzeentch. The other Chaos gods stirred. Khorne snarled in fury, Nurgle laughed with interest, and Slaanesh smiled knowingly. And somewhere between those realms, Tzeentch reformed his fractured essence, his thousand eyes burning with amusement. "Fascinating," he murmured. "He changed reality, and yet left it intact. Perhaps the greatest agent of change is not chaos itself, but curiosity." Back in his own ship, Rick poured himself another drink, leaning back in his chair. "Well, Morty, we just outwitted a god, rebooted a dying universe, and committed at least 3 acts of cosmic heresy. I'd say that's a productive afternoon." Morty groaned. "I just want to go somewhere normal for once, Rick. No warp storms, no gods, no screaming skull planets." Rick chuckled, typing new coordinates into the console. "Sure thing, Morty. Somewhere normal, like the grimdark galaxy where optimism goes to die." He winked at the camera, glass raised. "To science, Morty. The only religion worth keeping." The ship's engines flared, vanishing into the void, leaving behind only the faint hum of restored stars and the whisper of a god who, for the first time in eternity, had been surprised.